The grand ballroom of the Hartington Estate buzzed with excitement as the city's elite gathered for the annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the marble floors, while waiters in crisp uniforms weaved through the crowd with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. In the corner stood a magnificent Steinway grand piano, its polished ebony surface reflecting the opulent surroundings. 12-year-old Marcus Jackson stood in the shadows, his worn sneakers and second-hand blazer marking him as an outsider. He was only here because his mother, Loretta, had taken an extra shift catering the event. The single mother of 3 worked 2 jobs to make ends meet in their small apartment on the city's south side. "Remember, stay out of sight and don't touch anything," she had whispered before disappearing into the kitchen. Marcus nodded obediently, but his eyes had already locked onto a magnificent piano across the room. Music had been Marcus's escape for as long as he could remember. Though they couldn't afford lessons or an instrument, he practiced whenever possible on the old upright at his community center. His music teacher, Ms. Rivera, often said he had a gift that couldn't be taught, a natural understanding of melody and emotion that made her believe he was destined for greatness. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself gravitating toward the piano. The caterers were busy, the guests engrossed in conversation, and the magnificent instrument sat unattended, practically calling his name. Just one touch, he thought, just to feel what real ivory keys were like under his fingertips. He glanced around nervously before approaching the piano. His heart raced as he extended his hand, his fingers hovering just inches above the keys. The temptation was too great. Gently, he pressed down on a single key, letting the pure, resonant note float into the air. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Marcus froze as a boy about his age stormed toward him. Blake Hartington, the son of the estate's owner, wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Loretta's monthly rent. His face twisted with indignation as several nearby adults turned to observe the commotion. "Get your hands off my piano. Who let you in here anyway?" Blake sneered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Conversations halted. Glasses stopped clinking. All eyes turned to the 2 boys standing beside the grand piano, one in designer clothes, chin raised in superiority, the other in his thrift store blazer, cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," Marcus mumbled, taking a step back. "I just wanted to." "You just wanted to what? Do you even know what this is?" Blake gestured dramatically at the piano. "This is a concert grand Steinway, worth more than your entire life. People like you shouldn't even be allowed to look at it." The silence in the room thickened as guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Marcus felt his throat tighten, tears threatening to spill. In the distance, he spotted his mother emerging from the kitchen, her expression changing from confusion to concern as she assessed the situation. But something inside Marcus wouldn't let him walk away. Marcus swallowed hard, his hands trembling at his sides. The weight of dozens of judgmental stares pressed down on his shoulders, but he couldn't move. The piano behind him seemed to radiate warmth, like an old friend urging him not to go. "I do know what it is," he said quietly, his voice steadier than he expected. "It's a Steinway Model D, concert grand, 88 keys." Blake blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "So you can read the brand name. Big deal." An older gentleman stepped forward, Blake's father, Richard Hartington III, distinguished in his tuxedo with silver streaks in his dark hair. His expression was stern as he assessed the situation. "What's happening here, Blake?" His voice carried the practiced diplomacy of someone accustomed to managing situations in the public eye. "This kid was touching my piano, Dad." Blake protested. "He shouldn't even be in here." Mr. Hartington's gaze settled on Marcus. "Young man, this is a private event. Are you here with someone?" Before Marcus could answer, Loretta rushed forward, still wearing her catering uniform. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hartington. This is my son, Marcus. He was supposed to wait quietly while I worked. We'll leave immediately." "Mom," Marcus began, but Loretta placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Not now, Marcus," she whispered urgently. From across the room, a tall woman in an elegant emerald gown approached. Dr. Eleanor Winters, the renowned director of the city's prestigious Philharmonic Academy, had been watching the scene unfold with interest. "Before anyone leaves," she said smoothly. "I'd like to know if the young man plays." All eyes turned to Marcus. His mother's grip on his shoulder tightened. He messes around a bit on the community center piano, Loretta admitted reluctantly. But he's never had proper lessons. We can't afford them. Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Would you play something for us, Marcus?" The room fell silent again, but this time with expectation rather than judgment. Blake scoffed audibly. "Him? Play the Steinway? That's ridiculous," he declared. "I've been taking lessons for 7 years. He'll just embarrass himself." Marcus looked up at his mother, his eyes pleading. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Just one piece," she whispered. "Then we go." With his heart thundering in his chest, Marcus approached the piano bench. The polish felt cool and smooth as he sat down, adjusting his position with the instinctive movements of someone who understood the instrument's demands. He placed his fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the ballroom. Soft, delicate, and hauntingly beautiful, the melody flowed from his fingers as naturally as breathing. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the music carry him away from the opulent ballroom, away from the judgmental stares, into a world where only the notes mattered. What the audience witnessed was nothing short of remarkable. This boy, who had never owned a piano, who had never had formal training, played with a sensitivity and emotional depth that many seasoned musicians spent decades trying to achieve. His body swayed gently with the music's ebbs and flows, his expression serene yet intensely focused. As the piece built to an emotional height, several guests discreetly wiped tears from their eyes. Dr. Winters stood transfixed, her trained ear recognizing something truly extraordinary. Even Richard Hartington found himself leaning forward, cocktail forgotten in his hand. Blake's smug expression had melted into disbelief. He had played the same piece at his recital last spring, after practicing it for months. Yet it had never sounded like this, so alive, so moving. When the final notes faded into silence, Marcus opened his eyes to find the room completely still. For a terrifying moment, he thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then the applause erupted, hesitant at first, then building to thunderous acclaim. People stood from their seats, cocktails and conversations forgotten. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Dr. Winters asked, approaching the piano with newfound respect in her eyes. Marcus shrugged, suddenly self-conscious again. "I just listen and try to copy. Ms. Rivera at the community center lets me practice there after school. Without formal training, without a piano at home." Dr. Winters pressed, clearly astonished. "We watch YouTube tutorials," Loretta explained, pride and protection warring in her voice. "He practices on a paper keyboard I drew for him when he can't get to community center." This revelation sent another murmur through the crowd. Richard Hartington exchanged glances with Dr. Winters, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Play something else," a voice called from the back of the room. "Yes, please do," another encouraged. Marcus looked uncertainly at his mother, who nodded her permission, a small smile finally breaking through her worry. This time, he chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement. As the hauntingly beautiful arpeggios filled the room, the atmosphere transformed. The wealthy guests who had been prepared to dismiss him minutes earlier now watched in reverent silence, witnessing something rare and precious raw talent in its purest form. When he finished, Dr. Winters was the first to speak. "Marcus, I'm the director of the Philharmonic Academy. We have a scholarship program for exceptional talents, and I believe you would be a perfect candidate. With proper training, you could—" "Excuse me," Blake interrupted, stepping forward with reddened cheeks. "I've been on the waiting list for that scholarship for 2 years. My father makes donations to the Academy. You can't just give it to someone because they can play 2 pieces." Dr. Winters fixed Blake with a cool gaze. "The scholarship is awarded based on merit alone, Blake. Your father's donations, generous as they are, don't factor into those decisions." Richard Hartington placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Blake, that's enough." There was a firmness in his voice that brooked no argument. Then, addressing Marcus directly, his tone softened. "Young man, That was truly remarkable. Would you play something more contemporary? I'm curious about your range. Marcus nodded, his confidence growing with each moment at the magnificent instrument. His fingers found the keys again, and this time, the opening melody of All of Me by John Legend filled the room. But Marcus didn't just play the notes, he transformed the pop ballad into something uniquely his own, adding jazz-influenced harmonies and subtle improvisations that showcase his intuitive understanding of music. From her position near the back of the room, Loretta watched her son with tears streaming down her face. How many nights had she heard him practicing silently on that paper keyboard, his fingers moving in the dim light of their small apartment after his siblings had gone to bed? How many times had she wished she could give him what he deserved, the tools to nurture his extraordinary gift? As Marcus played, memories washed over her. Marcus at 5, creating melodies on a toy xylophone that should have been beyond his capabilities. Marcus at 7, begging to stay late at school just to play the old upright in the music room. Marcus at 10, being scolded by his math teacher for tapping complex rhythms on his desk instead of focusing on fractions. The crowd's reaction grew more enthusiastic with each piece. Marcus played 3 more songs of jazz standard, a classical piece, and finally, an original composition he'd been working on during his limited practice time at the community center. Did you write that yourself? Dr. Winters asked when he finished the last piece. Marcus nodded shyly. I call it Mother's Hands. It's for my mom. Loretta pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. The piece had captured everything: her struggle, her determination, her love for her children. Richard Hartington approached the piano, his demeanor completely transformed from his earlier businesslike assessment. Marcus, that was extraordinary, truly extraordinary. He turned to address Dr. Winters. Eleanor, I want to sponsor this young man's education personally beyond just a scholarship, whatever he needs. Blake's face flushed an even deeper red. Dad, what about my recital next month? You said you'd... Blake, his father interrupted firmly. You have every advantage in the world. You have a beautiful piano you rarely play. You have weekly lessons with the city's best instructors. And still, you've never played with half the heart this young man has shown today. He lowered his voice. Perhaps instead of resenting Marcus's talent, you could learn something from his dedication. Blake stared at his father in disbelief, then at Marcus, conflicting emotions battling across his face. The adults around them waited for another outburst, but instead, something unexpected happened. Blake's expression slowly shifted from anger to a reluctant curiosity. How you make it sound like that? He asked Marcus, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. I've been playing that Chopin piece for months, and it never sounds alive like that. Marcus hesitated, surprised by the genuine question. I don't just play the notes. I try to feel what the composer was feeling. Music is like talking without words, you know? You have to mean what you're saying. The simple wisdom of his answer caused several adults to exchange knowing glances. Dr. Winters seized a moment. That's exactly right, Marcus. And that can't be taught, it can only be nurtured. She turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of tonight's gala is to raise funds for arts education in underserved communities. I think we've just witnessed exactly why this mission is so crucial. Talent doesn't discriminate based on zip code or family income, but opportunity often does. The guests murmured in agreement, many reaching for their checkbooks with newfound enthusiasm. What had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation had transformed into a powerful demonstration of why their charitable efforts mattered. Richard Hartington raised his glass. I'm doubling my pledge tonight. Who's with me? A chorus of agreements followed as guests called out increased donation amounts. The energy in the room had completely transformed all because one boy had dared to touch a piano. As the excitement continued around them, Marcus found himself face to face with Blake. I'm sorry for what I said, Blake mumbled, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. It was wrong. Marcus nodded, accepting the apology without fanfare. It's okay. Your piano is amazing. I'd be protective of it, too. An awkward silence stretched between them until Blake asked, Could you maybe show me how you do that run in the middle of the Chopin piece? Mine always sound mechanical. Marcus smiled. Sure. Sit down. The two boys sat side by side on the bench, an unlikely pair united by the universal language of music. Marcus demonstrated the passage, explaining how he thought about the phrasing. "See, it's like you're telling a story," he explained. "These notes here are like a question, and these are the answer." Blake tried to imitate the phrasing. His attempt noticeably improved, though still lacking Marcus's natural touch. "It's harder than it looks." "It took me forever to get it right," Marcus admitted. "I used to practice the fingering on my leg during bus rides." As they continued to talk, the adults watched in amazement at how quickly childish prejudice had dissolved into mutual respect. 1 month later, Marcus walked through the imposing doors of the Philharmonic Academy for his first official lesson. The scholarship covered his tuition in full, while Richard Hartington's personal sponsorship provided for a quality piano in the Jackson family's apartment, which they had been able to upgrade thanks to an anonymous donation that Loretta suspected came from the Hartingtons, and additional private instruction. The Academy's hallways were lined with photographs of famous alumni who had gone on to perform in concert halls around the world. Marcus tried not to feel intimidated as he followed Dr. Winters to the practice room assigned to him. "This will be your space, Marcus," she explained, opening the door to reveal a room with excellent acoustics and a beautiful upright piano. "You'll have scheduled lessons, but you can also reserve this room for practice time whenever you need it." Marcus ran his fingers reverently over the piano. "Thank you, Dr. Winters. I still can't believe this is happening." "Believe it," she said firmly. "Your talent earned you this opportunity. Now, your dedication will determine where it takes you." She checked her watch. "Your instructor will be here in 15 minutes. I thought you might like some time to get acquainted with the space." After she left, Marcus sat at the piano, taking a moment to absorb the reality of his new circumstances. Just as he was about to begin playing, there was a knock at the door. Blake Hartington stood in the doorway, looking far less imperious than he had at the gala. "Hey, Dr. Winters said I'd find you here." "Hey," Marcus replied cautiously. "What are you doing here?" Blake entered the room, hands in his pockets. "I have lessons on Thursdays, too. Different instructor, though." He hesitated. "My dad and I have been talking a lot since the gala, about privilege and stuff." He looked uncomfortable, but pressed on. "Anyway, I wanted to show you something." He pulled out his phone and played a video. It was a community center where Marcus used to practice, but it looked completely different. The old, out-of-tune upright had been replaced with a brand-new grand piano. The walls had been painted, and new music stands filled the room. "My dad's company renovated the whole music program," Blake explained. "Ms. Rivera's face when they delivered the piano was pretty awesome." Marcus stared at the video in disbelief. "That's incredible. All those kids who could never afford lessons." "Yeah, Dad says it's just the beginning. He's starting a citywide program to identify musical talent in underserved areas." Blake shuffled his feet. "He says you open his eyes." "Mine too, I guess." Before Marcus could respond, his instructor arrived, a renowned pianist who had performed with orchestras around the world. The lesson that followed was challenging but exhilarating. For the first time, Marcus received professional guidance on technique and interpretation, filling in the gaps in his self-taught foundation. After the lesson, Marcus found his mother waiting in the lobby, still in her work uniform. "How was it?" she asked eagerly. "Amazing, Mom. Professor Chin says I have remarkable instincts, but my technique needs refinement." He grinned, "Which basically means I've been doing it wrong, but somehow getting it right." Loretta laughed, wrapping an arm around his shoulders as they walked out. "That sounds about right. You always find your way, don't you?" Outside the academy, they spotted Richard and Blake Hartington getting into their luxury car. "Mr. Jackson," Richard called, approaching them. "I was hoping to catch you. How was the first lesson?" "Incredible, sir. Thank you again for everything." Richard waved away the thanks. "No need for that. True talent deserves nurturing, and you've got it in spades." He handed Loretta an envelope. "This is an invitation to Marcus's first formal recital next month. The Academy is featuring him alongside several other scholarship students." Loretta accepted the envelope with a grateful nod. "We'll be there." After the Hartingtons departed, mother and son walked the bus stop, both lost in thought about how dramatically their lives had changed in just a few weeks. You know what the professor said today? Marcus broke the silence. He said music has the power to break down barriers. I didn't really understand what he meant until now. Loretta squeezed his shoulder. Your father used to say something similar. He'd be so proud of you, Marcus. So proud. Marcus rarely heard his mother mention his father, who had passed away when he was just 4. The comparison made his chest swell with emotion. As they waited for the bus, Marcus noticed a small girl watching him from a nearby bench. She couldn't have been more than 6, her worn clothes and scuffed shoes reminding him of himself not so long ago. "Are you the piano boy?" she asked shyly. "My mommy showed me the video. You play so pretty." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Video?" The girl's mother, who had been digging through her purse, looked up with an apologetic smile. "Someone recorded your performance at the Hartington Gala and posted it online. It's gone viral, almost 2 million views now. My Lily has been begging for piano lessons ever since she saw it." 2 million views? Loretta repeated, astonished. The woman nodded. "It's inspiring a lot of kids in the community." The video was titled "Black Boy Mocked for Touching Piano Leaves Audience Speechless." Pretty clickbaity, but the content is beautiful. Marcus knelt down to the little girl's level. "Do you like music, Lily?" She nodded enthusiastically. "But Mommy says pianos cost too much money." "Did you know there's a new piano at the community center? Anyone can use it. And I heard they're starting free beginner classes next month." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Can I go, Mommy?" As the mother and daughter discussed the possibility, Marcus stood back up, a feeling of profound satisfaction washing over him. The bus arrived, and as they boarded, Loretta gave her son's hand a gentle squeeze. "You're not just changing your own life, Marcus. You're opening doors for others, too." 1 month later, Marcus performed at his first formal recital. The audience included not only the elite patrons of the academy, but also dozens of children and parents from his old neighborhood, invited through a new community outreach program funded by the Hartington Foundation. As Marcus took his place at the grand piano on the academy stage, he caught sight of little Lily in the 3rd row, watching with the same wonder he had felt the first time he'd seen a real concert piano. He smiled, then turned his focus to the keys beneath his fingers. The music that followed told his story, where he'd come from, what he'd overcome, and the boundless possibilities that lay ahead, not just for him, but for every child who had ever been told they didn't belong. The thunderous applause that followed Marcus's recital performance confirmed what many already knew: a star had been born. As he took his bow, Marcus spotted faces throughout the audience that represented the journey he'd taken. Dr. Winters beaming with pride, Blake Hartington offering genuine applause, Ms. Rivera wiping tears from her eyes. At the center of it all, his mother, standing tall with dignity and joy radiating from her face. Backstage, Marcus was surrounded by well-wishers, including several representatives from prestigious music schools already interested in his future education. But he politely navigated through the crowd to reach his mother. "You were magnificent," Loretta whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Absolutely magnificent." As the crowd dispersed, Richard Hartington approached with Blake by his side. "Marcus, that was exceptional," Richard said. "The foundation would like to discuss expanding the community music program. Your input would be invaluable." "I'd be honored to help, sir." Blake stepped forward, extending his hand. "Great performance. That Rachmaninoff piece is insane. I've been working on it for months and can't get past the 3rd page." Marcus shook his hand with a smile. "We could work on it together sometime if you want." "I'd like that," Blake replied, and the sincerity in his voice showed how far they'd come from that first confrontation. As the Hartingtons walked away, Marcus noticed little Lily hovering nearby with her mother. "Did you like the concert?" he asked her. She nodded enthusiastically. "I started lessons at the community center last week. Ms. Rivera says I have a good ear." "Keep practicing," Marcus encouraged. "Maybe you'll be on this stage someday, too." Later that evening, as Marcus and Loretta rode the bus home, they passed the community center, where his musical journey had begun. The lights were on despite the late hour, and through the windows, they could see several children gathered around the new grand piano, their faces alight with the same passion that had driven Marcus all these years. "Look at that," Loretta said softly. That's your legacy already beginning. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool bus window, watching the scene until it disappeared from view. I never thought touching that piano would change everything. It wasn't just touching the piano, his mother corrected gently. It was having the courage to show your gift, even when others tried to make you feel small for it. As they continued their journey home, Marcus reflected on the whirlwind his life had become. From paper keyboards to grand pianos, from whispered melodies to standing ovations, the path hadn't been easy, but each challenge had only strengthened his resolve. Music had always been his voice, his refuge, his dream. Now it was becoming his future, and not just his alone, but a beacon for other children who might otherwise never discover their own gifts. One touch of a piano had indeed left an audience shocked. But the real miracle was what happened afterward. Barriers broken, minds opened, lives transformed. The music would continue, spreading like ripples in a pond, touching lives Marcus might never even meet. And that was the most beautiful composition of all.